I am here with this esteemed panel. I mean, is this a wonderful way to start this morning? And the first question is going to be for you, Steve. With the gridlock and the hyper-partisanship that we've seen the norm in Washington over the last 4 years, and I'm not sure we expect it to change anytime soon, can you tell us how does an organization like AdvaMed migrate this difficult environment to get the decisions that you've been able to get?
Well, first let me say it's great to be in Chicago, and it's great to look out on such a terrific crowd here. I want to thank Lester Knight and the entire community for rallying around the conference. It's just tremendous. Yep. You're right that it's a challenging environment, to be sure. But I have to say the organization, I think, has been quite successful recently within that context. You look at our User Fee Agreement, for example, that we negotiated with the FDA and has to work its way through the Congress. It passed on a bipartisan, almost unanimous basis on a bipartisan bicameral vote in the last year and a half. If you look at the device tax repeal effort that we've undertaken, continues to grow in terms of bipartisan support. We had 79 senators vote for repeal of the device tax in the Senate. Diagnostic payment reform, which I'm sure John Bishop will address as we go on, was again a bipartisan-led initiative. And I think what it reflects is that this is an easy industry to get behind. I mean, it's an industry that's been an engine of both public health gains as well as economic growth in terms of high-paying jobs and just incredible, again, public health gains. You look at death from heart attack down by 50%, stroke down by 30%, breast cancer 20%, enormous contributions to public health. So I think the key is really bipartisanship and making sure that policymakers understand the value that medical technology brings to the healthcare system and to our overall economy. And we're excited as we look into next year. Fred Upton's going to be here with us. He's the chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. He's leading an initiative called the 21st Century Cures Initiative, which we think is going to be another terrific bipartisan platform for us to develop specific ideas on how to further streamline the FDA regulatory and reimbursement process.
That would be terrific, because we all know we need that, right? Yeah, very important. So David, during your time as chairman at AdvaMed, you negotiated the groundbreaking User Fee Agreement designed to improve the efficiency, the timeliness, and the transparency of the FDA process. So it's 2 years now past that. Can you give us an update as to how that's going and what the issues are there?
Sure. I think that, as you said, the essence of the agreement and our overarching goal was to re-up a user fee arrangement as we had in the past, but to learn from our experiences in the prior iterations of the user fee arrangement with the FDA to ensure that we made a lot more progress in ensuring timely and predictable, transparent decisions around pre-market approvals. I would tell you that a couple years into it now, there's reason to be pretty optimistic that we're making good progress in this regard. It's obviously early because there's going to be a lag from some of the adjustments that have been made to the process, and staffing levels have been increased. We've been very focused on collaborating with the FDA to ensure that those staffing levels are brought up to a standard that will allow them to achieve that overarching objective, and training and education has been very important. But I would also look out and maybe a bit uniquely in today's world and say that the leadership that has been brought forth by the FDA and CDRH both has been very commendable.
Good.
There was a leap of faith and I think an establishment of trust in the onset of the implementation of the user fee arrangement, and we're seeing improvement. We saw negative trends in this regard for both 510Kable devices and PMAs for probably 7 or 8 years previously, and we saw those steady out in the early signs of improvement. That's the experience that we've had as an industry, the experience that we've had as a company at Zimmer also. Yet there's a lot more work to do. This is a journey. AdvaMed, under Steve's leadership with the staff and the member companies, have been very persistent at holding the FDA accountable. But as I said, the FDA has been open, properly collaborative, and I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to continue to make improvement. One of the things that we're focused on, and maybe to give a shout out on this issue, is we need to ensure that we don't get caught up in any kind of a budget sequestration problem. It's solved temporarily, but come fiscal year 2016, that's back on the table. And so we're going to keep pushing the association and as an industry to ensure that there's a permanent fix to that risk.
Other panelists, any thoughts and comments on that?
Well said.
Well said. Okay, great, thank you. So Joe, one of the biggest challenges facing the industry are the cost pressures, along with this continuum care and the payment models. Given that, what does the MedTech industry need to do to ensure innovation is being rewarded, which we've heard a lot of talk about, and new life-changing products continue to come to the market?
As we look at our industry, we're looking at access to our technology across the globe. Our technologies are saving lives every day. I don't think everybody stopped to calculate, but probably is a fraction of a second that a life is touched around the globe by one of our technologies. And the outcome is mostly positive, enhancing lives, therapies that create much better outcomes for the patients. So when you look at our industry, how we innovate in a way that sometimes is not seen within the four walls of a hospital. Right. We innovate across a continuum that sometimes is not well understood by the payers. So the initial cost of that innovation is high, with significant economic advantages on diseases that go beyond hospital. Lifestyle, employees going back to work, and a significant amount of cost reduction that comes with a better life for the patient. And that is the equation that sometimes get lost at the payer level. And the incentives, how they are designed today to fee for service, primarily in the US, creates that disincentive for a longer term view of our technology. So we as an industry, it's incumbent upon us to work with governments, including primarily insurers, payers, and administrators of hospitals, to show them the value equation. At Covidien, we have a small example. We have a project called CARES, C-A-R-E-S. Is an acronym for us helping hospitals with their data understand the cost of surgery and the variability of cost of the same surgery within the same hospital amongst 20, 25 surgeons. And you would be surprised by the cost multiplier and the differential between practices and how physicians approach a certain procedure. So it is not only a public policy issue for us to work with insurers, payers across the country and across the globe to demonstrate the value of our technology, economically speaking, but also is incumbent upon the industry to create programs to be able to get to the providers and have them understand how they can work in a way that will save money for the system overall. It's not all about, the days of us selling one technology at a time. I think is pretty much gone. You've got to be able to sell your value proposition. As part of the value, you have the ability to influence the hospitals. Not every hospital is open to it. We had a great case study down in Georgia where we gave the data. The data was tremendously compelling, but the hospital was not ready for us. 6 months later, they call us back and we're able to go in and help them with a proctorship of physicians to get them on the same path of delivering that care within a standard deviation that was acceptable and cost effective.
That's just wonderful to hear. I love hearing stories like that. Any other insights from any other panelists, John or David?
Well, I think that Joe makes the point that is really going to be an important one for us to stress going forward as an industry. And I think that we all have understood the value proposition maybe from different perspectives as part of industry, but we probably haven't done a good enough job historically of getting that message out. Yep. We've been focused on clinical outcomes and evidence in that regard as opposed to the economic outcomes. There was a study that was published a little bit over a year ago in the context of total joint replacements where they took the year of 2009 and ran through societal savings by virtue of the 600,000 total knee replacements that were done in that year just in the United States, and the value was $12 billion. Wow. So, you know, these are the kinds of studies and the word that we have to get out to make sure that people understand that this industry and medical technology is very much the solution as opposed to being cast as part of the problem for escalating healthcare costs.
Go ahead, Steve.
I'll jump in here too. I think the industry, as Joe and David have said, have to open the collective aperture and think about value differently than they have historically. It's not just about providing value, you know, within a DRG or within a hospital, but across a broader spectrum of the patient's procedure, after the procedure, and so forth. But policymakers also need to open their aperture and broaden the definition of value as well. We commissioned a study by the Milken Institute that looked at value, what I would call off-ledger savings that don't get enough attention.
Right.
And those savings are, you know, people returning to work, reducing the burden on caregivers. And what the Milken Institute essentially did was look at the current trajectory we're on, what the trajectory might look like if we had better incentives, a better ecosystem and environment, and what would happen if we had a worse case scenario. Right. And the economic output from the greater trajectory is in the trillions. If we can broaden our definition of value and open our aperture and capture some of those off-ledger savings that historically have not gotten the attention they deserve.
So here's the question, how do we get there? I mean, I think intrinsically we know this and we feel it, but how do we get more momentum going in this direction? Anybody? John?
Well, in part, a lot of that's starting already. I mean, one of the positive aspects of the accountable care initiatives is to start to look at wellness.
Yes.
Big part of the problem that we've had in healthcare is that basically we've been focused on treating in the disease state. And we're going to be much better off if we're treating prior to the occurrence of the disease state and starting to do a better job of reimbursing for that. As we look at better keeping people well in that regard, and with the initiatives, it's actually going to include utilization of more diagnostics in the area, definitive data there, and that the overall patient outcomes will in fact be better, and the associated costs, to the extent that the group is talking about, those costs can and are starting to be captured now. So we can look at total cost coming down. What I would say generally speaking is we look at the diagnostics aspect, where we've been saying we've been spending as a percent of overall healthcare about 2 to 3% being spent in diagnostic. We would actually be much better off to transfer a larger percentage, better employment of diagnostics, to give treatment on a knowing basis versus empirical. They'll improve the overall outcomes, and as a result, our costs are going to come down. That's where we need to be focused more on collecting some of that data and continuing to carry that message across in society here.
Great comments. I appreciate that. So you talked about testing. Let's talk a little bit about molecular testing. It's projected to be the fastest growing segment of the diagnostics in the coming years. So what are some of the key challenges that need to be addressed to speed up the development and the adoption specifically of the molecular diagnostics?
Well, first off, I think it would be helpful to say, why is molecular the fastest growing segment?
Sure.
And the reason why that it is we've all been, a number of us working our entire career in this area, saying how do we treat better, how do we do a better job in diagnosing. And with molecular now, with the ability to get into the genome, we have now for the first time the opportunity to what I call go upstream versus downstream. So in other words, we're testing historically, looking at once we have the disease and then it's really manifested itself, then we're detecting. With molecular, we can go upstream and we can detect the shift in the genome very, very early. We can detect the presence of an organism substantially earlier before it has the opportunity to more effectively take root and start to cause the infection. Now, as a result of that, we can start to initiate therapy faster as we look at the field of oncology. We're starting now to talk about, for the first time, some cures in that area, but in order to be really effective, we're going to need to have rapid, accurate, early diagnosis. And that's going to give us our higher rate of effectivity. Now, it's for all of those reasons that molecular, as a result, I think, in my opinion, is going to be the #1 growth area, certainly within the laboratory community, for nominally the next 10 years. Because at the end of the day, relative to all of the rhetoric and all of the discussion on discovery within the genome, we are only at the very beginning of the technology S-curve in that regard, and we have a long way to go. So as we better understand what's going on within the genome, we have the ability to now accurately detect that. And the other item that's starting to happen is previously molecular is known to be powerful, but it was very complex, so therefore it was rendered only to specialty laboratories and specialty functions within major institutions. All of that has now changed. You can get a very accurate molecular diagnosis even if you are sitting in a village in Africa with no windows, operating off of a solar panel, running that system. You can get a result as accurate as you can get it in a university-based hospital setting to date. So that's shifting the whole paradigm. We're getting big benefits with that. To come to your question, what we're going to need, to state the obvious there, and Dr. Hamburger is going to be here. I have very positive comments. It's been great to see the progress that the FDA has been making. As we're moving in this regard, though, we're going to need to move down the upfront barriers, and we would be much better off to allow product to get into the market, to allow the community to utilize these early on, and then put a better measure on the end. So in other words, bring down the front-end barriers to market entree, increase post-market surveillance, which would give the opportunity to utilize these discoveries on a much more rapid basis as they're made, and then judge after a few years, does it make sense to keep that particular one on the market or not, based against actual effectivity data.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or comments?
Maybe I'll just jump in real quick. I'm really proud of the work that our AdvaMed DX group has done under John's leadership, not only the collaboration that he's referring to in terms of the FDA, but as I mentioned at the outset, we had terrific legislation enacted as a part of the physician formula fix earlier this year that will bring needed transparency to the way the Medicare program reimburses new tests, new molecular tests, bring added consideration of the value those tests bring to patient care. And we were also pleased to see the agency move forward with its guidances on lab-developed tests and bringing high and moderate risk tests under the FDA review process. We think that closes an important gap in patient safety.
Yeah, I'm certain it does. So we've heard you all talk about some of the key issues in the MedTech industry, and so at this point I'd like to kind of go fast forward. Let's go 10 years in the future. What do you think the opportunity and the challenges are going to be in 10 years if we had to look at what it is at that time?
Well, I'll take a start at that right now. Actually, it's starting to happen right now. Often they say is when you get your biggest leaps forward relative to innovation is when you reach a junction between technologies. And now what's starting to happen, so I was just talking about molecular and what's going on there, is we're getting an intersection of biotech and high tech. And as a result of that, certainly within the next 10 years, we're going to see some very, very substantial leaps forward with broader-based dissemination, test utilization, but being able to get that data transmitted up into the cloud, back out of the cloud, and in the hands of the clinician very, very rapid. So now we're talking about, in a number of cases, how do we improve test-to-treat times, where they're talking about improving times. Just recently I was looking at a case where they improved from 10 days to 2 days. They're trying to go down to 1 day for a certain disease. In this case, we'll be able to run the result, get the result back to the clinician, most likely while the clinician is still with the patient. So it's going to be a lot of change. I think a lot of that's going to start happening certainly within the next 5-year time frame. So I would say on a 10-year outlook, You're going to see a lot of tech mixed in with biotech. You're going to see substantially broader dissemination of systems out into the market. Systems are also going to become much more miniaturized as we go forward here. So it's really going to be self-propelling on a large scale.
So I heard about you guys have got a device that actually fits on the back of a bicycle. So in some countries that don't have hospitals, they can ride their bikes and do multiple tests on one device. I mean,
Yeah, actually we do. They're
Finance.
actually traveling around in a number of countries out in remote villages with systems on trucks. There's another one where we had a picture of the fellow with the system in a backpack on a motorcycle,
Yeah.
running around. And as I said, they're getting a result that's just as accurate as if the result was run right here in Chicago at Loyola.
it's fabulous, fabulous.
I would say that in 10 years, if you think through where we sell our products are used by a very small portion of the population. And I think the ability of the industry to get to a point where we can create jointly with policymakers and providers the ability to give access to health care to a much greater portion of the population, that people can get your bariatric bypass, your heart valve, your knee, not if you are on tier 1, class 3 hospital cities in most of the emerging markets, but have that in places where there is a cost-effectivity delivery of care, and the access is there. I think this is where our industry needs to look at, because you can make for a long time great products that only about 20% of the people in the world have access to. Imagine the possibilities if we can make the products which have accessibility in different parts of the world, and now you have a much greater population like John was talking about. You have the diagnostic, but you've got to be able to treat. You've got to be able to address. So how do we leap from that to accessibility? So I think there's a great work to be done by the industry, and I think we have the leadership in the industry to get there.
Oh, definitely. David, any
Well,
comments?
I think that there's incredible opportunity just to maybe build upon John and Joe's comments. If you give consideration to the aging population, the demographic drivers for growth, it presents incredible opportunity when you consider some of the markets that are still in a development phase as it pertains to the delivery of health care. In the total joint replacement space, age 45 and up out of 1,000 people in the United States, about 20 people receive a knee or a hip. And if you look at some of those developing markets, it can be one or even less than one. So off of those huge population bases, that growth is going to be, an incredible driver, but I think also announce the need for broader innovation, as we've been talking about. And the challenge for the system is going to be to figure out a way to bring these solutions that have terrific clinical and economic benefits to larger and larger numbers. And this is where I think that the amplified view of how we can bring technologies to bear to address those challenges in a more intelligent way and deliver these solutions in a manner that is going to drive economic benefit across society is the huge opportunity. It's there. Now, if a regulator or another stakeholder within the system is oriented towards the answer is less medical devices, which represents about 6% of the total spend, you're not going to get there, right? But I think that the dynamics with the patient population bases, aging, emerging markets, it's going to be unmistakable that we need to partner much more deeply with the providers and the delivery systems from an industry standpoint, and regulators, importantly, to figure out how to bring technologies forward that can do this all cost effectively. And I'm very optimistic that that opportunity is out there, and I think that whether people are proactive among the various stakeholders or reactive, they're going to come around to seeing the value of the technology. And I think it also puts a big highlighter on why an association like AdvaMed is so important, because I think that the work that we do as an association makes a big difference towards bringing those stakeholders together, gaining alignment, and at the end of the day, ensuring that we're delivering the best on behalf of patients, which is what it's all about.
Absolutely. Steve?
Hard to add to that. Hard to add value to that. I completely agree. You know, we're very excited at AdvaMed, particularly our work in emerging markets. You look at China, India, Brazil, other markets, they're regulating the industry for the first time. They're making key decisions about how they're going to reimburse new technology. And we believe we can bring a lot of value to those discussions. We bring a global perspective on best practices. And it's a great opportunity. We have, you know, middle classes emerging in all of those markets that want access to better medicine are indicated for that care. And we feel like we can play a key role in reshaping those discussions. But I really am so bullish on the future. If you look at the aging demographics, the emerging markets, how we're learning more about human biology, particularly on the diagnostic side. If ever there was an industry that could evolve and adapt and thrive in this new environment, it's the device industry.
Well, I got to tell you, this is an incredible panel. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. 10 years from now is awfully exciting to me, listening what you guys are thinking about. And I want to thank all of you in the audience because we do this together. This is an industry that is going to change healthcare in the future, and our time is now. You've heard the things that are going on, and you see the things that we need to do. And I thank AdvaMed for being here, for the advocacy that you've had in the past, and frankly, for what you're going to do in the future, because we're going to shape the future. We're going to make the future. We are building the future together, and we need all of us to do that together because there's some real challenges here. And I think working together, we can make it happen. It's an ecosystem. It's about the continuum of care. It's reducing the costs. It's addressing real problems. And so I thank you for your attention today. I hope you enjoyed the discussion and have a wonderful rest of the conference.